So, as I say, I don't think, although it's very frustrating to look at an entire financial system that is so corrupt and so destroyed from the inside, one just has to try and pick out the little bits that are interesting. And for me, as as an observer of the situation, I could only believe in gold and silver.
Well, it's quite obvious to anyone who's been watching the markets for any length of time that those precious metals markets have been manipulated for an awfully long time, and it is a question of how long they're able to maintain the illusion. And of course, that does depend on, for example, people not actually claiming physical possession of their gold and silver and relying on stocks, etc., to do the math for them. But once that does start to change, and as you say, as it starts to become apparent that there is a run on the gold and silver market, the upside is going to be pretty extraordinary. I like also what you wrote at the end of this article again on GenevaBusinessInsider.blogspot.com. You said, if you wish to preserve your wealth in a world where governments and banks, for their own survival, are determined to inflate it away, steal from you through zero interest rates, high taxes, fraudulent activities, or outright theft, then you must hold real assets, be it land, gold and silver, art collections, etc., completely outside of the banking system and as far away from government intervention as possible. I don't imagine that needs to be spelled out in too much detail, but perhaps you should explain why it is important to keep it away from the banking system and away from government intervention.
Well, yes. I mean, we're looking at a situation where we have a very small number of too big to fail banks. And it is not all the banks who are completely corrupt, but it is the too big to fail banks essentially who are corrupt. And those are the banks that are behind and are investors in the Fed, for example. Now, these people with half a dozen phone calls around the world can turn off and on the taps on an awful lot of things. And if one day there's a directive saying, well, tomorrow morning we're going to have a bank holiday, and if you've got your goods stored in Citibank or Bank of America or JP Morgan, to pick my favorite, you can come to their front door, knock on it, and nobody will let you in to give you access to your safety deposit box in the bank. So that is a dangerous issue. The other issue that's a problem, of course, is that if you happen to be in America and you have your goods, you have your gold or precious metals stored again in an institution in their vaults, and there's a regulation that one day says, all right, all of these vaults have now got to be opened, and all the safety deposit boxes opened in front of a notary to see whether you have any physical gold in there, it's very difficult to resist. So for citizens of different countries around the world, the best solution is to make sure that the physical custody of the asset you're holding is not in the hands of a bank who have shown a spectacular lack of integrity towards their clients and free license to do so, basically backed by the government. I mean, I was looking at the Royal Bank yesterday and thinking to myself, essentially what has happened is the politicians don't want to ask for another bailout from the public, so they give the bank free license to fleece and steal from the public, and cover for their misdeeds at any time, saying, oh dear, we need to change the regulations. It is a conspiracy to defraud the public. And I think if you look at physical gold and silver and you look at the banks in that light, you would never, ever, ever contemplate leaving your assets with a bank.
Well, exactly.
Question as to whether you should even leave the assets in the country where you live or where you have your nationality. Because frankly, I think that is very dangerous, because once again, the governments have control over you.
Exactly right. And at the very least, I think diversification is a key strategy, not only in terms of what you are physically holding, but where you are holding it. So it couldn't hurt to have that spread out across different jurisdictions. Exactly right. Well, I understand you're also working on, in your own local situation there, what's happening in Switzerland and the banking and financial sector and the regulations, as you point out, that are being modified as we speak, and how that's affecting things in Switzerland. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit about that.
Sure, yeah. Well, I mean, Switzerland has got two major banks, UBS and Credit Suisse. Both of these banks have been extremely irresponsible in the way they've managed their affairs. They have got heavily involved in the US, UBS more particularly, but also Credit Suisse. And the problem with this is that it has led to the wrath of the American regulators. Now, American regulators have multiple standards. They have none for their own banks, and they have very strong standards for other banks which may have a part of the market, or they may perceive as directly or indirectly taking some of the people who should be paying taxes in the US and moving them elsewhere. So Switzerland's a small country. It is easily intimidated. We have at this stage in Switzerland's history, and I am a Swiss citizen and also British, some of the most pathetic politicians we have ever had in control, who do not seem to be able to stand up to anybody, who bend over in awe to the Americans, and worst of all, don't have a strategy. Now, if one has to bend over in awe, that is because one realizes the relative force and one knows what to do about it. But if you do it just as a gut reaction to pressure, then you're not being very smart. So this is the issue for Switzerland, and we are seeing now the major banks where more and more people are saying we need to do our business outside Switzerland. The banking secrecy, which was an absolutely enshrined, in fact, even into the constitution of Switzerland, has more or less been put in the dustbin, and everyone is in free flight. Now, the worst thing that I have seen recently, which concerns me directly, is the involvement. People who've been involved in working with American clients have had their names given to the American government by the banks. Now, I'm sworn to banking secrecy with the punishment that if I don't respect banking secrecy, I can even go to prison. But my employers and the country of which I'm a national are perfectly happy to give my name over. So the only thing I can say is I'm very happy I took my kids to Orlando a couple of years ago, and you're certainly not going to get any tourist dollars from me in the near or long-term future. And I think that is the only protest that I can make to the system. But that is one issue. And the other issue, which is making the market shake, is the petroleum industry and the trading business, where Geneva and Zug, two regions in Switzerland, have been particularly strong. And again, the pressures are mounting to have stricter regulations and all the rest of it. And basically what is happening is that the companies who are based here say, well, if you want to decide what our morality should be, we'll decide our own morality, but we'll do it from Singapore, or we'll do it from Hong Kong, or we'll do it from somewhere else around the world. Now, I would love to be the person who could actually change the immorality of the oil business. And, but once again, I mean, we're looking at minor manifestations of it compared to what was done by the Bush regime when they invaded Iraq, or by the European Union when they invaded Libya, or when, if you go back in history, the various histories with Iraq, for example, where the state-owned petroleum company was 90% owned by foreigners, Britain, France, and the US, and 10% owned by the Iraqis. Now that, for example, upset Saddam Hussein, and one can understand why. So it's all just part of a package of hypocrisy where the general public is led to believe one thing's done for one reason, and the reality is quite different.
Well, it is sad to say that the prognosis for the world economy is not good at this point, but again, there are things that people can do to protect their own wealth. So again, I hope they are following Geneva Business Insider at genevabusinessinsider.blogspot.com. And on that note, I understand you've also started posting some videos to your YouTube account. Perhaps you can tell people about that.
Yes, indeed. I was inspired to do so by a certain Mr. James Corbett.
I'm blushing like a maiden.
That's all right. Don't worry at all. Credit where it's due, but you put onto your blog on one occasion, I think, telling people how to do it. And I went out and listened to it and took the advice and started doing some radio and some video. It takes a little bit of while to get comfortable with it, but once you are, I think there's a huge transformation between writing a blog and actually doing a video, having a conversation, listening to real people, and actually having a feeling whether you trust and believe that person, like the color of his eyes or whatever else it might be. So I'm doing that, and I've actually taken there's a young student in a local university who's giving me a few tips on how to present myself, and little by little I hope I'm going to get better at it and people are going to enjoy it more. There's an old saying that says if you pick up a pen you pick up a sword, but if you pick up a video camera you pick up at least an Exocet missile and perhaps a nuclear missile, depending on where you manage to target it. And at the end of the day, I mean, the pleasure for me is to be able to communicate to people who are interested and want to understand the bits that I understand, and glean from them the parts that I didn't know, but they can explain clearly to me. And in fact, what is happening with all of this is the mainstream media, I think, for sophisticated listeners, is just going to be completely ignored apart from seeing the football results. And if you want any real meaningful information, you're going to say, all right, well, I'll look at the Geneva Business Insider or a large number of other very articulate, very capable people who put the situation clearly, simply, and with honesty and with no conflict of interest, because I have no conflict of interest in telling the truth, and that has become a rarity.
Unfortunately so, but as you say, that's in the mainstream paradigm. But of course, we are moving into a different paradigm where it's more of a conversation and less of some one-way directed information spout coming directly from the corporate Borg. So it is for the better. Of course, there's a lot of wrong information and misinformation and people who are trying their best but getting a lot of things wrong. So there's a lot of bad with the good, but I think that that's something that we will have to sort out for ourselves. And I think we have to be responsible adults in terms of starting to source our own information. So I always am glad to see more people taking up the mantle and starting to get into the conversation rather than watching from the sidelines. So I'm happy to link to that for people who are watching this YouTube video. I will put an annotation in, so you can just click on that annotation to go to his YouTube channel, David Smith's YouTube channel. But for the people who are listening to this or watching through some other medium, perhaps you can just tell them the name of that channel.
My video channel is Geneva Business Inside.
Inside, okay.
Inside.
All right.
Not enough room for the last letter, but Geneva Business Inside.
Okay, so youtube.com/Geneva Business Inside. Of course, that's also linked up from genevabusinessinsider.blogspot.com, and all of that will be linked up in the show notes for this interview. So lots of different ways to get there, but however you get there, I hope you are tuned in and watching some of this commentary and reading it on the blog. So David L. Smith, it's always a pleasure to have you on the program. Thank you again for joining us today.
It's been great. Thank you very much once again. Okay, speak to you soon.
The Corbett Report is brought to you by you. Your support makes the Corbett Report possible. Sign up for the subscriber newsletter or purchase a DVD at corbettreport.com/support.